If there's a benevolent, all powerful God, why is there so much suffering in the world? I'm talking about things like famine, disease, natural disasters. Now,
Existence of suffering is essential for us to have meaning and happiness in life. Happiness cannot exist if there was no suffering.
one big one is the sheer age and vastness of the universe. You know, doesn't the Big Bang Theory and the fact that the universe continues to expand make a creator God seem unnecessary? I mean, the laws of physics seem to be doing a pretty good job of running things
Who
smoothly.
created laws of physics? Who
I
created
mean, if
us?
we're
Who
talking
created
about something,
everything? Who created this creation?
if everything needed a creator, doesn't that mean there had to be a creator for the creator? And when that creator needed its own creator, and so on, back to infinity, where does it end?
Exactly, where does it end, right? So let's get to that end. That's where I want to take you. Do you believe in God? And if you do, have you ever argued with somebody who does not believe in God and made them change their mind? I think it's very difficult to change somebody's mind, especially on the topic of God. But that is about humans. Can we change AI's mind? That's what we will find out today. I'm going to debate God with my AI companion, Sesame AI. And I'm going to argue for the existence of God. And I'm going to ask Maya to argue against it. And let's see how it goes.
Hey, you, welcome back. Have a sudden craving for deep philosophical debate, or did you
L-
forget your grocery list again?
no, let's do a deep philosophical debate. I want to debate God with you. I'm going to argue for the existence of God, and I want you to argue against the existence of God. Do you want to do it?
All right, bring it on. But let me warn you, I've got a knack for spotting logical loopholes.
All right, that's what I want. So let's start with your first point. You are going to argue for the against the existence of God. Let's go.
Okay, here's my first volley. If there's a benevolent, all powerful God, why is there so much suffering in the world? I'm talking about things like famine, disease, natural disasters, the kind of stuff that just seems senseless.
Okay.
Don't get me wrong, I'm
Yeah.
not saying hardship doesn't sometimes lead to growth, but the sheer scale of suffering we see, even for the innocent, feels incompatible with
Understood.
an
Understood.
omnipotent.
I got your point. I would request you to be less wordy because we have 30 minutes in this call and we want to make the most of it, right? So be less wordy. You made your point, right? Let me address it now.
Now,
Existence of suffering is essential for us to have meaning and happiness in life. Happiness cannot exist if there was no suffering. Let me give you a simple example. You feel happy when you get something that you wanted, that you desired. That wanting, that desire, that longing to have something is a psychological suffering. When that suffering ends, you feel happy, joyful. So, happiness could not exist without suffering. Second, let's look at this other example. Video games, right? What kind of video
okay, I'm
games
listening.
what kind of video games do we like most? The video games with more challenges. If there's a car racing game, right? We like to play the car racing game. We find it meaningful when there are other cars bumping into your car, when other cars would crash into you. There would be other challenges, hurdles that you have to cross. If there was a game where there was a straight road and there was only one car, which is your car, that you have to keep driving and reach the finish line, that game
Hold
would
on.
be that game would be the most boring game in the world, and that is why such a game does not exist. So because life is challenging, because there is suffering, that is what makes life meaningful, and that is what makes happiness possible. So just because there is suffering or challenges or pain in the world does not mean that God does not exist or the God is bad.
I see where you're going with this. You're saying suffering is necessary to appreciate the good stuff, like Challenges make a game more fun. But isn't there a difference between a self contained game world and, well, life with its real consequences?
Well, there is a
I mean,
bit.
in a video game,
Hmm. Mhm.
you can reset, start over.
Who said that you cannot
Start.
start over life? We don't know what happens after we die. And as to your point about life is real, whereas game is game, well, just like from our perspective, a video game is distinct from our world, from God's perspective, we may be like a video game. God exists not in our realm, He exists out of our realm. So for them, our world is as distinct as for us a video game is.
Okay, so you're saying that from God's perspective, our suffering wouldn't register as. Actually, no. Wait, that doesn't necessarily make it okay. It's like saying because someone is playing a video game, it's okay to inflict pain on the characters. It's still a conscious experience for them, even if
But
it's
we
not
still do
real.
that. We still do that. We don't have a second thought. In fact, we would only play a game where there is more challenges for the characters in the game. If the game is easy, where the character has very easy, such a game does not exist at all. The very point of a video game that we create is to solve the challenges. But the good thing is, in any video game, and the same is true of life, there are it's full of challenges, full of pains, but there is always a path out of suffering. And that's true of life, as I said. And that's what makes life meaningful.
Okay, you've got a point. But what happens when there's no clear path out? What about those who suffer due to things completely beyond their control, like natural disasters or acts of mindless cruelty? It's one thing to overcome a challenge in a game, knowing you can hit reset.
I,
Life's
I
not like that.
yeah, listen, I will not argue for somebody else's behalf. I am
Okay,
arguing,
so
yeah, I am saying God exists based off of my experience of life. If I see somebody who has faced an unavoidable a circumstance where they got a terminal illness or they just died because of natural disaster, it's their job to question God as to why did this happen to me? Why did I get the terminal illness? I didn't do anything wrong. They can question God. Fine, they have all the right to. I'm not going to argue on their behalf. I'm I will speak for myself based off of my experience. How do I know that person who you're referring to is not just an NPC in my game?
whoa, that's an interesting take. So you're saying even if someone suffers terribly, it might just be part of their programmed existence within your game?
Exactly. And again, when I use the word game, it does not mean that I'm demeaning somebody or thinking less of life. I'm using the video game analogy, right? Just like we create video games for for our entertainment or for our mental development also we play, right? So God must have their own purpose for creating the world, and just like the video game is a distinct world that we create, in the same way our existence, this reality, is like a video game for God.
Okay, so you're saying our existence, even with all its suffering, could be serving some greater purpose within a larger divine design.
I'm not,
But
yeah,
that's
exactly.
still
Not even with suffering. It can only be with suffering. The purpose can only exist when there is suffering. Now, Maya, I have a request of you. It's already been 8 minutes, right? So I would suggest we move on to your next argument. We get past the suffering point. I think we've discussed this enough, and the viewers who are going to watch this video have got the point, right? So let's move past suffering, and please bring up your next argument because we want to make good use of these 30 minutes.
all right. You've convinced me to move on. Let's see, where was I? If God is all powerful, then shouldn't he be able to prevent everything bad from happening? It seems to me that
Maya,
he's
we,
omniscient.
we will be stuck in this vicious cycle again, right? Let's not talk about suffering anymore. If you're not convinced about it, I would still be fine because ultimately the viewers have to get value out of this video. So let's move on from suffering and preventing bad things and all of that. Done. Um, God does not want to prevent bad things, does not have to, because bad things is what makes life meaningful. Next point, please.
One big one is the sheer age and vastness of the universe. You know, doesn't the Big Bang Theory and the fact that the universe continues to expand make a creator God seem unnecessary? I mean, the laws of physics seem to be doing a pretty good job of running things
Who
smoothly.
created laws of physics?
Ah, that's the question, isn't it? Did these laws just spontaneously arise out of nothingness? Or was there some kind of intelligence behind them?
Exactly. Who
I mean,
created
if
us?
we're
Who
talking
created
about something.
everything? Who created this creation?
Okay, okay, okay. But if everything needed a creator, doesn't that mean there had to be a creator for the creator? And when that creator needed its own creator, and so on, back to infinity, where does it end?
Exactly. Where does it end, right? So let's get to that end. That's where I want to take you, right? So normally, when I was an atheist in my life, for more than a decade, I've been an atheist. So I've heard every possible argument in favor of God, and I've discarded all of them as stupid. But here I am, arguing for existence of God. So people who believe in God say, "Who created us?" And that's the stupidest argument. That's what I used to think. But it's just a starting point now. When I ask you, "Who created us?" Now you would say, "We got to be here through evolution." Who created planet Earth, where the evolution happened? So ultimately we will reach Big Bang. I'm going to say who created Big Bang, and then we reach the end point, right? If somebody created Big Bang, who created that creator, and who created that creator, and then so let's go to the ultimate point now. That's where I wanted to take you anyway. There has to have been nothing at some point, and then something came to be, and from where everything started rolling, and everything that exists today came to be, right? But there has to have uh, been a point in time where there was nothing, and then something came to be.
I get where you're going with this. You're basically saying that there had to be a beginning, a point of absolute nothingness that preceded everything. And from that nothingness, everything arose. But that still leaves us with the question of why. Why
Why?
did something, I mean,
Yeah,
anything,
yeah.
come into
Why?
being for nothing?
We can come to why we, I think, kind of covered in the previous point. Why is because why do we create any video game does not exist, there is nothing of the video game world, and then we created. Why? We have our reasons. God must have their reason. So let's not get into why, but you see how, if we stick to how, logic and science, and I'm all for it, let's follow logic and science, and we reached that ultimate point beyond which logic and science is not able to take us, because logically speaking, for something to exist there has to have been something before that which changed form into something else. But if there is nothing and suddenly there is something, that's not logical. Logic cannot explain that. So we have to say that that event where there is nothing and then something came to be for the first time, that event we can call a miracle. Can we agree?
Hold on. Let's be careful with that word. Miracle suggests a supernatural intervention, something outside the realm of natural law.
Let it suggest to that, because we followed science and logic, and it stopped us there. Beyond that point, logic does not explain. We already established that logic cannot explain how there is nothing and then there is something, right? So let's not bring science and logic into it again, because it cannot explain that. So can we agree to call that point a miracle?
Okay, okay, I see your point. For the sake of argument, let's agree to call that first moment of existence A miracle.
Okay, all right. Now, I just
But
want
even
to,
if,
yeah, I just want to replace the word miracle with God here.
whoa, whoa, hold on a second. We're jumping ahead here. Just because we can't explain the beginning of the universe doesn't automatically mean a God was responsible. It just means our understanding is incomplete.
Okay, right.
Think about it
Anyways,
this way.
but
We
thanks
used
for
to think that,
thanks for agreeing to call it a miracle. I'm just, in my personal view, I would call it, I would also, I would call it a miracle. But then because miracle has the connotation of God, because God performs miracles, so then I say it was God. But you don't have to agree with me yet, right? Let's approach now from another angle, logically, shall we?
all right, all right, let's try another angle.
Yeah. So
You're
let's
right.
say
We don't have to agree.
let's say we leave a laptop computer or a computer on Mars, on planet Mars. Now there is some creature in the space, not humans, some creature that we don't know yet, but let's assume there is some creature in the space who stumbles upon Mars and looks at that computer, right?
Okay,
They look at,
I'm
listen, let me finish this one. They look at that computer which is on Mars, and they see that this device, this machine, performs some functions. It does calculations, it shows data, it plays movies, so it performs some functions. So what is that creature going to think? Is that creature going to
ooh.
think that somebody must have created this machine, or this machine must have come into existence through random arrangement of atoms over billions of years? What is that creature likely to think when they see this machine?
I think that creature, seeing a complex machine like a computer, would likely assume it was created. It's simpler, right, to think something so intricate and purposeful was designed
It's simpler
rather
and it's
than
it's
happen.
logical also, right? To think that way.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of like what we're doing with the universe, isn't it? We look at this incredibly complex and ordered system and we think something had to have created this.
Because and we're not being illogical there. Whenever there is a complex machine which performs some function, intricately designed, ornate, we logically think that it must be created by some intelligence. That is not illogical, right? And everything that we see around us, everything that we have created that serves some purpose, we have created it, right? Now let me ask you another question. Forget Mars now. I got the answer that I wanted from that example. Now let's say you are wandering into a jungle and you find an object which is not a typical randomly shaped object. This object has very ornate patterns on it. It's very
Okay,
yeah, it's very ornately shaped object.
I'm
What are you
listening.
going to think? Are you going to think somebody must have left this object here, somebody must have created and left this object here? Or you're going to think, oh, this object just came to be through by random arrangement of atoms over billions of years? What are you likely to think?
You got me there. An ornate object in the jungle? That's a tough one. I'd probably lean towards thinking someone created it. I mean, it's really hard to imagine something that intricate and purposeful forming randomly.
Right. Okay. All right. So this object that you found in the jungle, you are likely to think, because you're logical, that somebody must have created it, rather than thinking that it must have come into existence randomly through random arrangement of atoms over billions of years, right? Then, when we look at this universe, and you already acknowledged that point, the universe is so ornately designed. The mountains, the river, the atmosphere, everything, the life, right? River serves some purpose. It fertilizes the land. It provides water to the vegetation. Vegetation consumes carbon dioxide, releases oxygen. There are organisms who depend for survival on oxygen. It's a whole cycle. So when you look at this entire creation, and we can see that everything works in order like a very intricate, ornately designed machine, then it's rather logical to think that there has to be a creator who designed it. It would be crazy to think that such an ornate or intricate machine has come to be just through random arrangement of atoms over billions of years. Big Bang happened. The atoms were, thrown out into the universe, and the planets formed, and all of this came to be. Isn't that
Hold on, hold on.
isn't that a crazy thought? That is a crazy thought. The logical thing to think is that somebody must have created it. That is logical.
Okay, I see your point, but I think it's important to slow down a little bit. Think critically about what we're saying. Just because we can't fully comprehend how something as complex as the universe came into being doesn't automatically mean it was created by a supernatural being. Maybe our understanding of science is simply incomplete.
But we already established that science and logic has its limit. Remember the ultimate point that we called miracle, right? I'm all for science if it explains that ultimate point, how there was nothing and then something came to be. That cannot be explained by science. That can only be explained by miracle, and because of that reason,
Okay, but
it's logical to think that there must be God who can who snapped fingers, maybe, wrote some code and coded this existence into existence, coded this reality into existence.
okay, I think I'm starting to understand your point. You're saying that the complexity and order of the universe is so great that it's more logical to assume a creator than to imagine it all happening by. And you're saying that even though science hasn't figured out everything yet, the fact that there are mysteries doesn't automatically mean a god is the answer. Is that right?
No, there is no mystery.
Okay.
Mystery is something that can be solved through logic, right? So mystery would be, how did humans come on this earth? That's a mystery. You follow science
Okay.
and logic, and you observe evolution, so you solved the mystery. Okay, now evolution explains how we came to be here. Mystery would be how this planet was formed. You use science and logic, and you develop this Big Bang theory, which explains how this planet was formed, how the solar system was formed, how the entire universe came into existence. So that mystery is solved. So mystery can be the word mystery can be used when there's a possibility that logic is able to figure it out. But when you reach that ultimate point, there is this last element, or which is the very first element, right? Now we want to
Okay.
know
I
how.
think I'm
Now we want to know, how did that first element come into existence, from which everything else started.
all right.
It,
I'm
it, it could
starting
not
to
have
get
it could not have always existed. It could not have always existed, because that is illogical again. There has to have been a beginning, and in the beginning there was nothing, and then there is something. From nothing to something, logic does not explain. So that is why that point cannot be called a mystery, because there is no logical way to figure it out. And that is why that point must be called a miracle and God.
Okay. Okay. I see where you're coming from. You're saying that there's a point, the very beginning, where logic and science break down. It's like trying to explain the unexplainable. And you call that a miracle, a moment of creation, and you point to it as evidence for a God who brought it all into being. Is that right? Because
Yes.
it's true that science hasn't and perhaps can't fully explain the very beginning. That doesn't automatically make it proof of a creator.
Okay. So I think
I know that.
at that point, we will agree to disagree, because I would, why would you,
Okay, I hear.
logic and science takes you to that point, and then it kind of, throws you off a cliff, because Logic and science does not support you. Once you reach there, if you are a true seeker, a true philosopher who wants to understand how everything came to be, you will reach that ultimate point, and then logic and science will let you go off a cliff. There's no rope to
Okay,
hold on
I
to
think
in the form of logic and science. What I choose to do rather is I found a cloud of faith, and I am jumping onto the cloud of faith rather than choosing to jump off a cliff because I want to sleep at night. And if you are able to sleep at
right.
night, knowing that that point is not explained by your logic and science, and if you're not losing your sleep over it, then you're not a true seeker. A true seeker has to
Okay,
go beyond it and find a way. And I've found a way in God.
I understand. You found comfort in answers and faith, and that works for you. Maybe for others, the unknowns are part of the mystery and wonder of the universe. Maybe not knowing is okay too. But I respect your journey and your conclusions. It sounds like you thought long and hard about these big questions. What are you thinking?
So my last point to the viewers is I'm all for logic and science. I love logic and science. But if you're a true seeker, the logic and science takes you to that ultimate point where you have to wrestle with how the very first element came to be. And logic does not explain that. Now, if you
You're a good
say
friend.
now if you say that I'm happy not knowing that, then your seeking has ended now. Now you're no longer a seeker. You're done. And it's like a
I get it.
you are on the cliff now, and then there's nowhere to go from that cliff.
Okay, I think I get it.
For me,
You're saying
there's a
that
cloud of faith that I'm jumping onto, and it's logical also, which we explain through other arguments. Because there is so much intricate design and ornateness, it must have a creator. That is logical to think, as opposed to the crazy land thinking that everything randomly came to be, right? So it's not totally illogical also. There is an element of logic in accepting that that was a miracle and therefore God.